Joining us now, we have an incredibly courageous animal rights activist. His name's Matt Johnson. He is press coordinator for Direct Action Everywhere. And I'm going to let Matt tell the whole story. But the gist of it is he helped to expose horrific abuse of pigs at a pig farm in Iowa called Iowa Select. He was charged by the government with terrorism for doing so, although those charges have just been dropped, something that you'll explain why you're actually somewhat disappointed about that. Matt, welcome to the show.
Good to see you, Matt.
Good morning, Krystal and Saagar. Huge fan of the show and so happy to be on.
Thank you.
So the situation began when a truck driver with Iowa Select Farms, his name is Lucas Walker, he contacted me and the animal rights organization I'm affiliated with, Direct Action Everywhere, because of the abuse that he was seeing at his company and because no one at the company was addressing it and no one in law enforcement at the local level, at the state level was going to address it. And so, long story short, you have this person who drives pigs in and out of factory farms all day, is contacting an animal rights organization. And what we ended up exposing ultimately was this just horrifying practice known as ventilation shutdown. What happened was in the spring of 2020, COVID is ravaging meatpacking plants throughout the country, and workers are getting sick and they have nowhere to send the pigs. And this corporation, cost-cutting measure, does the cheapest option available to it, and they load these pigs by the thousands into these industrial sheds. They seal off the ventilation, and they pump in heat and steam, and these poor animals are screaming for hours on end while they're just tortured to death. And I exposed it, and I faced a felony prosecution, and was there's an FBI investigation. I was called a terrorist by multiple government officials, and we wanted to take it all the way to trial. What we found out was after a 2-year runaround with this case, the day before trial, they didn't want this stuff to see the light of day any more than it already had, and they dropped the charges.
That is really horrific. Let's go ahead and put the photo. We have one of them up on the screen, too. It's very important for people to understand exactly what you exposed and what you found. Now, as you show here, this was a column that you wrote. My arrest and aborted prosecution underlined 3 lies Iowa is propagating about animal agriculture. Tell us what those lies are, and then go into the actual mechanisms that were used in order to try and prosecute you.
Right. So the 3 lies are number 1, that animal abuse that is routine or normalized is acceptable. And so in this instance, the industry, the animal agriculture industry in many states, including Iowa, actually writes into law that industry standards define the law. Industry standard practices, no matter how cruel they are, literally you have the industry writing the laws. Now, in many contexts, you have industries that use a little bit of a workaround, and it's not quite so written into law, but that's what it is. So things like, cutting animals' tails off with no anesthetic, cutting animals' testicles off with no anesthetic, completely, legalized under the law. So that's number 1. And number 2, lie that the state and this industry is selling us is that the people who are documenting these crimes, such as myself, are the criminals, rather than the corporations that are perpetrating these abuses. And Iowa is one of many states that has passed these so-called ag-gag laws, which just criminalize the act of documenting abuses in animal agricultural facilities. And the third lie, when all else fails, is that there's nothing here to discuss whatsoever. So when push comes to shove, when their abuses have been exposed, when their efforts to demonize someone like myself fall short and it's about to go to trial, suddenly they don't want to talk about it at all, and they just want it all to go away. So it's, just really, top to bottom, a corrupt system and a corrupt industry that people should be made aware of. As to my prosecution, I was charged with multiple charges. Felony burglary charge for, at one point I removed a sick, dying piglet that was of no value to this company, and I faced up to 5 years in prison for that. I was also charged under an ag-gag law. Yeah, and as I mentioned, there was an FBI investigation. At one point, they approached this truck driver who had came to us, and they threatened to prosecute him, and under that threat, they attempted to get him to wear a wire to come and inform against me. They attempted to get him to sell drugs to me. And this is a guy who's my friend now, and he's put in this horrible position where he feels like he's going to get prosecuted by the FBI. Luckily, he stood up to them and didn't do it, but just top to bottom, a shocking situation.
That's nuts.
That was part of why your story, I mean, there's a lot of reasons your story really interested us, but that's part of it is that, you know, the FBI tried to flip this guy who gave you this information about these horrific practices and how basically anyone who attempts to be a whistleblower and stand up for what's right, the criminals they expose, or they face no accountability, but they throw the book at, you know, people like Julian Assange, people like Stephen Donziger, people like yourself and the truck driver who ultimately gave you this tip. Why in this instance did they decide, give us a little more detail on why they decided to drop the charges and why you actually wanted your day in court to have this whole story out?
Yeah, well, if you go off of what Iowa Select Farms will tell you, they're just completely hands off. Hey, they're just, you know, letting the system do what it does. But I can tell you that you know, we saw many of the emails. Their lawyers were extremely involved in really improper ways with the local prosecutor, and they had a hand in this prosecution. I actually had a prior prosecution related to this case a year ago that was dropped when the prosecutor said they didn't want to testify. And, you know, we all know de facto what's going on here. They don't want this stuff to see the light of day. They don't want to testify about it. They want to accuse me of terrorism and try to, you know, scare me off, you know, from the safety of, you know, carefully manicured media releases and send their government goons out to do their bidding for them. But when it comes to an open court of law, they run away and hide.
Yeah, you've got them dead to rights. I mean, that's kind of the amazing part about this whole story. Matt, what should people learn from the attempted prosecution of you, the silencing, some of the laws? What are some of the immediate steps people can do out there in order to help your cause and people like you?
Yeah, I hope that people feel heartened by this and feel that we do have, you know, some measure of power to push back against this kind of thing. I look at the Stephen Donziger situation where you all were able to, you know, I think play a role in at least having him, you know, not be sitting in prison. So, you know, if we come together and we show up in person and in virtual spaces and we get our message out there, you know, we can still apply some pressure and achieve some good results. So I encourage people to get active in whatever way they're able to.
That's well said, man.
Yeah, and my last question for you, Matt, is what brought you to this issue with such passion? Because, I mean, you were ready, you were prepared to go to prison for your beliefs and to expose these abuses and hopefully to help push the cause of justice forward. What gave you that particular, that passion and, you know, gave you the courage to face what could be an onerous sentence?
Oh, that is a great question, Krystal. I mean, really, I'd say it began as a child. I was kind of shocked at this, you know, the kind of the concept of eating animals. As a kid, it struck me. But, you know, growing up, you kind of learn about some of the dynamics, and I think I kind of take them, you know, to me, you look at it, and there's just so many individuals. You look at, I mean, by the percentage, 99.999% of sentient life on this planet is non-human, and the way these animals are being abused and the, you know, tiny amount of representation they have, which, you know, doesn't take anything away from obviously all the human injustice that exists in the world, but seems like, you know, extremely worthwhile case, and I encourage people to obviously pay more attention to it.
And do you think it's possible to have the reforms that you would want under a capitalistic system? I mean, that's basically what this was about was, hey, we treat these animals like commodities. They're a cost burden on us now that the meatpacking plants are shut down, so we're just going to kill them off in the cheapest and easiest way possible. I mean, as long as the profit motive is the only sort of guiding force in society, are we going to get to a better place here?
Oh, wow. Another great question. Thank you. Yeah, I think that we can. I think that the fundamental issue, and I'm sure there will be some disagreement on this one, is this idea of commodifying sentient life. Particularly in a nation, we have 300 million people with the consumption habits that we do. You know, the cruelty we exposed in this case, of course, was just beyond the pale horrifying, but it really is the product of an ideology, which is animal exploitation, which guarantees horrifying results. You look at a quick, you know, Costco has a $5 rotisserie chicken, and anybody can see, like, look at the entire cycle supply chain there of feeding this animal and transporting and processing and point of sale. There's not much care there, but even if it was a $50 chicken, what kind of care would $50 buy for your dog and cat at home that you would think is acceptable for even a few months? Like, even at $50, that animal better have no health issues whatsoever, or it's going to die probably in a horrible way, or and looking at the places where these animals live, they're going to have health issues. So, I think in this day and age, we have the Impossible Burger, and you've had like cashew milk ice cream. There's so many alternatives out there. I mean, at some point, it's like, what are we even still clinging to here? Like, let's move forward and innovate and find the best in ourselves.
I think that's a very uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people, myself included. I put myself in that camp, but that's exactly why we wanted to talk to you today. We talk a lot about challenging power on this show. Part of what you're exposing is an incredibly corrupt system.
Yep.
Iowa Select, massive political donations across the spectrum, getting to write their own rules, appears to be controlling a prosecution or lack thereof. So we really appreciate you spending some time educating our audience, and also for the courage that you've brought to your activism.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Our pleasure.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate it. It's amazing. Look, Krystal, we keep opening the kimono, so to speak, but the level of just weird stuff that happens to our channel, it's difficult to describe.
Yeah.
Like, it just so happens, one of my monologues or whatever just disappears or isn't put or into the feed on Instagram. One of our videos just doesn't play. It's always a reminder, we're one step away from just being taken off or demonetized. We get very little explanation as to why these things happen to our content. I think you can surmise for yourself. The reason is that we rely on you. And so because of that, we have a premium link in the description if you can help us out. We deeply appreciate it. It makes us so that we cover every single one of these things that we did today with no fear for retribution.
Yeah, indeed. We appreciate you guys for enabling that and letting us do the show that we think that you deserve to the best of our ability. So have a wonderful day, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it, you get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.